Look at that. Boom. Well, let's expand this a little more. Boom. Look at that. That big fat subscribe over there too. Let's make that a little bigger. Nice and big. Look at that. Beautiful. All right. What we've got here today is I'm too lazy to do my school reading myself. Essentially, what's going on is I am reading Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and it is a love story. Let me read the back on here, and we're starting here. I know it says chapter 29, but we're actually going to be starting at chapter 31. So let me just... So we're about halfway through the book, but that's okay because a lot of this book has been set up of characters and all that, and it's not too big of a deal, and I know no one's watching this right now, so, again, not that big of a deal. There's my notes. I gotta have my notes up too. Just so I can take some notes for school as well. I'll get that up. See if we get anyone in here in the live chat. We got one person watching. That might just be myself. That could be incorrect, but for now, it looks like that's just me. 31, maybe. I don't know. All right. Yeah, but this is a kind of older book, which is one of the biggest reasons why it's kind of tough for me to read it. So I'm going to be reading you this sensible love story to you, my dear viewers. I believe this is the time and the place. Prepare to be put on a journey to a whole new world as we go back to the beginning of the 20th century with Jane Austen's beautiful novel right here. Let me read the back for you. Since its immediate success in 1813, my bad, beginning of the 19th century, Pride and Prejudice has remained one of the most popular novels in the English language. Jane Austen called this brilliant work her own darling child, and its vivacious heroine, Elizabeth Bennet, as delightful a creature as ever appeared in print. The romantic clash between the opinionated Elizabeth and her proud beau, Dr. Darcy, is a splendid performance of civilized sparring, and Jane Austen's radiant wit sparkles as her characters dance a delicate quadrille of flirtation and intrigue, making this book the most superb comedy of manners of Regency England. So yeah, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. We're reading it. I got the digital version up here, so you guys can see and follow along with what I'm reading. But this is really just for me to be able to read it effectively on my own time, and actually get through these chapters. I gotta get to like chapter 45 by the end of this. So we'll actually see how long it takes me to do. But without further ado, let's begin chapter 31 of this book. You know what? This light was cool, but it's more engaging. We have the light off. You gotta make it kind of. Ooh, look at that. It's kind of... Nah, I like it like this. Alright. Let's go. Chapter 31. Colonel Fitzwilliam's manners were much admired at the parsonage, and the ladies all felt that he must add considerably to the pleasures of their engagements at Rosings. It was some day, however, before they received any invitation thither. Yeah, so for anyone watching, this is homework. This is like totally homework, and I gotta take notes as well. But please feel free to, please feel free to, hey Cade, please feel free to comment what you think about any happenings within the novel. Okay, I need it. It was some days, however, before they received an invitation thither, For while there were visitors in the house, they could not be necessary, and it was not till Easter Day, almost a week after the gentleman's arrival, that they were honored by such an attention. And then they were merely asked on leaving church to come there in the evening. For the last week they had seen very little of Lady Catherine or her daughter. The Colonel Fitzwilliam had called at the parsonage more than once during the time, but Mr. Darcy they had seen only at church. Oh, dang, I only seen him at church, bro. The invitation was accepted, of course, and at a proper hour they joined the lady in Lady Catherine's drawing room. Her ladyship received them civilly, but it was plain that her company was by no means so acceptable as when she would get nobody else. And she was, in fact, almost engrossed by her nephews, speaking to them, especially to Darcy, much more than any other person in the room. Colonel Fitzwilliam seemed really glad to see them. Anything was a welcome relief to him at Rosings, and Mrs. Collins' pretty friend had moreover caught his fancy very much. He now seated himself by her, and talked so agreeably of Kent and Hertfordshire, of travelling and staying at home, of new books and music, that Elizabeth had never been half so well entertained in that room before, and they conversed with so much spirit and flow as to draw the attention of Lady Catherine herself, as well of Mr. Darcy. Ooh, get some attention here. Oh, look at that, you got the italicized his. His eyes had been soon and repeatedly turned towards them with a look of curiosity, and that her ladyship, after a while, shared the feeling, was more openly acknowledged, for she did not scruple to call out, "What is it that you're saying, Fitzwilliam? What is it that you are talking of? What are you telling Miss Bennet? Let me hear what it is." "We are speaking of music, madame," said he, when no longer able to avoid a reply. "Of music? Then pray speak aloud." This is the part I wanted to do, is the freaking dialogue. "It is of all subjects my delight. I must have my share in conversation if you are speaking of music. There are few people in England, I suppose, who have more true enjoyment of music than myself, or better natural taste. If I had ever learnt, I should have been a great proficient, and so would Anne, if her health had allowed her to apply. I am confident that she would have performed delightfully. How does Dejania get on, Darcy?" Alright, I want to make sure my mic was working. That would have been bad if it wasn't. Can't have you guys missing out here. Mr. Darcy spoke with affectionate praise of his sister's proficiency. "I am very glad to hear such a good account of her," said Lady Catherine, "and pray tell her from me that she cannot expect to excel if she does not practice a good deal." "I assure you, madam," he replied, "that she does not need such advice. She practices very constantly." "So much the better. I cannot be done too much, and when I next write to her I shall charge her not to neglect it on any account. I often tell young ladies that no excellence in music is to be acquired without constant practice. I have told Miss Bennet several times that she will never play really well unless she practices more, and though Mrs. Collins has no instrument, she is very welcome, as I have often told her to come to Rosings every day and play on the pianoforte in Mrs. Jenkinson's room. She would be in nobody's way, you know, in that part of the house." Mr. Darcy looked a little ashamed of his aunt's ill breeding and made no answer. When coffee was over, Colonel Fitzwilliam reminded Elizabeth of having promised to play to him, and she sat down directly to the instrument. He drew a chair. We're not getting any live chats in here. It's just still me. It's just me. It's fairly sad. Can I have the live stream chat like disconnected? Yeah, here it is. Pop out chat. There we go. Oh, but I still need to see the views, so it doesn't even matter anyways. Alright. When coffee was over, Colonel Fitzwilliam reminded Elizabeth of having promised to play to him. I gotta get a drink of water here. And she sat down directly to the instrument. He drew a chair near her. Lady Catherine listened to half a song, and then talked, as before, to her other nephew, till the latter walked away from her, and making with his usual deliberation toward the pianoforte stationed himself so as to command a full view of the fair performer's countenance. Elizabeth saw what he was doing, and at the first convenient pause, turned to him with an arch smile and said, "You mean to frighten me, Mr. Darcy, by coming in all this state to hear me? I will not be alarmed, though your sister does play so well. There is a stubbornness about me that never can bear to be frightened at the will of others. My courage always rises at every attempt to intimidate me." "I shall not say you are mistaken," he replied, "because you could not really believe me to entertain any design of alarming you, and I have had the pleasure of your acquaintance long enough to know that you find great enjoyment in occasionally professing opinions which in fact are not yours, or not your own." Ooh, dang, crushing it. Give me a second. Hold on. Pair of shorts. It's kind of warm in here. This book is insane, bro. It's insane. Alright, sorry about that. Let's get back to reading. Elizabeth laughed heartily at this picture of herself and said to Colonel Fitzwilliam, "Your cousin will give you a very pretty notion of me, and teach you not to believe a word I say." Oh, wait. Oh, right. Okay. "Your cousin will give you a very pretty notion of me, and teach you not to believe a word I say. I am particularly unlucky in meeting with a person so able to expose my real character in a part of the world where I had hoped to pass myself off with a degree of credit. Indeed, Mr. Darcy, it is very ungenerous in you to mention all that you knew to my disadvantage in Hertfordshire, and give me leave to say, very impolitic too, for it is provoking me to retaliate, and say such things may come out as it will shock your relations to hear." "I'm afraid not of you," he said smilingly. Pray let me hear what you accuse him of," cried Colonel Fitzwilliam. "I should like to know how he behaves among strangers." "You shall hear then, but prepare yourself for something very dreadful. The first time of my ever seeing him in Hertfordshire, you must know, was at a ball, and at this ball what do you think he did? He danced only 4 dances, though gentlemen were scarce, and to my knowledge more than one lady was sitting down in want of a partner. Mr. Darcy, you cannot deny the fact." "I had not at the time the honor of knowing any lady in the assembly beyond my own party." "True, and nobody can ever be introduced in a ballroom. Well, Colonel Fitzwilliam, what do I play next? My fingers wait your orders." "Perhaps," said Darcy, "I should have judged better. Had I sought an introduction, I am ill qualified to recommend myself to strangers." "Shall we ask your cousin the reason of this?" said Elizabeth, still addressing Colonel Fitzwilliam. "Shall we ask him why a man of sense and education, and who has lived in the world, is ill qualified to recommend himself to strangers?" "I can answer your question," said Fitzwilliam, "without applying to him. It is because he will not give himself the trouble." I certainly have not the talent which some people possess," said Darcy, "of conversing easily with those I have never seen before. I cannot capture a tone in conversation, or appear interested in their concerns, as I often see done." "My fingers," said Elizabeth, "do not move over this instrument in the masterly manner which I see so many women's do. They have not the same force or rapidity, or do not produce the same expression. But then I have always supposed it to be my own fault, because I will not take the trouble of practicing. It is not that I do not believe my fingers as capable as any other woman's of superior execution." Dang, I'm really slipping up. Darcy smiled and said, "You are perfectly right. You have enjoyed your time much better. No one admitted to the privilege of hearing you can think anything wanting. We neither of us perform to strangers." Here they were interrupted by Lady Catherine, who called out to know that they were talking to know what they were talking of. Elizabeth immediately began playing again. Lady Catherine approached and, after listening for a few minutes, said to Darcy, "Miss Bennet would not play at all amiss if she practised more, and could have the advantage of a London master. She has a very good notion of fingering, though her taste is not equal to Anne's. Anne's would have been a delightful performer, had her health allowed her to learn." Elizabeth looked at Darcy to see how cordially he assented to his cousin's praise, but neither at that moment At that moment, nor at any other, could she discern any symptom of love, and from the whole of his behaviour to Miss DaBoss, she derived this comfort from Miss Bingley, that he might have just as likely to marry her, had she been his relation. Lady Catherine continued her remarks on Elizabeth's performance, mixing with them many instructions on execution and taste. Elizabeth received them with all the forbearance of civility, and, at the request of the gentleman, remained at the instrument till her ladyship's carriage was ready to take them all home. That is chapter 31. I'm guessing, so essentially, like, I guess the whole point is that, like, you know, again, Elizabeth and Darcy are kind of going back and forth, you know? I am interested in the understanding of this, like, this last line right here, which I'm going to actually highlight and put in my notes here. Because she is wanting to, like, I noticed this about, like, Elizabeth throughout the book, you know, she's, like, looking, I don't know, just different stuff, you know. That's not important. Chapter 32, baby. Glad to see. Yo, hit me up in the chat if you're watching right now. I wanna know who's watching. Who's watching? Hit me up. I wanna know. Is it still just Cade? Well, I see we got 2 people in here. Who's watching right now? Come on. Let yourself be publicly known. Because I will say this. Obviously, hit the subscribe button and subscribe if you're not already. But if you are already subscribed, you should chat in this public chat, because forever that this live stream stays up for, you will permanently be in the live chat. You will permanently be in the live chat. And you know, you will forever have your name cemented within the video. Forever. And I honestly think that's worth it. It really is. I'm going to try to read four chapters. I might do like 4 chapters tonight. We'll see. 32. Elizabeth was sitting by herself the next morning and writing to Jane while Mrs. Collins and Maria were gone on business into the village, when she was startled by a ring at the door, a certain signal of a visitor. She had heard no carriage. She thought it was not unlikely to be Lady Catherine, and under that apprehension was putting away her half-finished letter that she might escape all impertinent questions, when the doors opened, and to her very surprise, I'm gonna get just kind of want like a thing to rest my arms on. This chair has kind of a rough thing on it. Oh shoot! Is it gonna be Mr. Darcy? I just kind of accidentally skimmed ahead a little bit there. When the door opened, and to her very great surprise, Mr. Darcy and Mr. Darcy only entered the room. Oh, we're getting something going on here. It's crazy. He seemed astonished, too, on finding her alone, and apologized for his intrusion by letting her know that he had understood all the ladies were to be within. Then they sat down, and when her inquiries about after Rosings were made, seemed in danger of sinking into total silence. It was absolutely necessary, therefore, to think of something, and in this emergence, recollecting when she had seen him last in Hertfordshire, and feeling curious to know what he would say on the subject of their hasty departure, she observed, "How very suddenly you all quitted Netherfield last November, Mr. Darcy. It must have been a most agreeable surprise to Mr. Bingley to see you all after him so soon, for, if I recollect right, he went but the day before. He and his sisters were well, I hope, when you left London." "Perfectly so, I thank you." She found that she was to receive no other answer, and after a short pause added, "I think I have understood that Mr. Bingley has not much idea of ever returning to... I think I have understood that Mr. Bingley has not much idea of ever returning to Netherfield again. I have never heard him say so, but it is probable that he may spend very little of his time here in the future. He has many friends, and it is at a time of life when friends and engagements are continually increasing." Wow, you're just flexing for this bro right now. Really? Okay. If he means to be but a little Netherfield, it would be better for the neighborhood that he should give up the place entirely, for then we might possibly get a settled family there. But perhaps Mr. Bingley did not take the house so much for the convenience of the neighborhood as for his own, and we must expect him to keep it or to quit it on the same principle. "I should not be surprised," said Darcy, "if he were to give it up as soon as any eligible purchase offers." Elizabeth made no answer. She was afraid of talking longer of his friend, and having nothing else to say, was now determined to leave the trouble of finding a subject to him. He took the hint, and soon began with, "This seems a very comfortable house, Lady Catherine. I believe did a great deal to it when Mr. Collins... Oh, Lady Catherine, I believe, did a great deal to it when Mr. Collins first came to Huntford." "I believe she did, and I am sure she could not have bestowed her kindness on a more grateful object. Mr. Collins appeared to be fortunate in his choice of a wife. Yes, indeed, his friends may well rejoice in having met with one of the very few sensible women who would have accepted him, or have made him happy if they had. My friend has an excellent understanding, though I am not certain that I consider her marrying Mr. Collins as the wisest thing she ever did. She seems perfectly happy, however. In a prudential light, it is certainly a very good match for her. Must be very agreeable for her to be settled within so easy a distance of her own family and friends." "An easy distance, do you call it? It is nearly 50 miles. "And what is 50 miles of good road? A little more than half a day's journey. Yes, I call it a very easy distance." "I should have considered the distance as one of the advantages of the match. I should never have said Mrs. Collins was settled near her family. It is a proof of your own attachment to Hertfordshire. Anything beyond the neighborhood of Longbourn, I suppose, would appear far." As he spoke, that there was a sort of smile when Elizabeth fancied she understood. "Oh, what? Ooh, crap! They're actually hitting. The sparks are flying. Sparks are flying." And we're kind of running low on viewers here. So, I mean, I'm just gonna have to. How do I end like? Though her taste is not equal to Anne's would have been a delightful performance had her health allowed her to learn. Elizabeth looked at Darcy to see how cordially he assented to his cousin's praise. Sparkles as her characters dance a times.
Yeah, what is going?
Oh, this is pretty sad. I'm just reading to myself at this point, but you know, whatever. I'm just doing this as kind of a thing. I don't know. I'm sad that not like at least one person's watching. No, it's just me. Well. As he spoke, there was a sort of smile which Elizabeth fancied she'd understood. He must be supposing her to be thinking of Jane and Netherfield, and she blushed as she answered, "I do not mean to say that a woman may not be settled too near to her family. The far and the near must be relative, and depend on many circumstances." Oh shoot, we lost the 0 viewer. Okay, so that wasn't me. We just lost a viewer. Dang it. Frick, I did have one viewer. Son of a gun. Well, whatever. "And where there is fortune to make the expense of traveling unimportant, I've already given up. I'll keep going. "Are you pleased with Kent?" A short dialogue on the subject of the country ensued, on either side calm and concise, and soon put an end to by the entrance of Charlotte and her sister, just returned from her walk. The tete-a-tete surprised them. Mr. Darcy related the mistake which had occasioned his intruding on Miss Bennet, and after sitting a few minutes longer without saying much to anybody, went away. "What can be the meaning of this?" said Charlotte, as soon as he was gone. "My dear Eliza, he must be in love with you." "Oh?" or he would have never called on us in this familiar way. But when Elizabeth told of his silence, it did, but when Elizabeth told of his silence, it did not seem very likely, even to Charlotte's wishes to be the case. And after various conjectures, they could at last only suppose his visit to proceed from the difficulty of finding anything to do, which was more probable from the time of year. All field sports were over. Within doors there was Lady Catherine, books, and a billiard table, but gentlemen cannot always be within doors, and in the nearness of the parsonage, of the pleasantage of the walk to it, and other people living in it, the two cousins found expectation of this period of walking thither. Almost every day they called at various times of the morning, sometimes separately, sometimes together, and now and then accompanied by their aunt. It was plain to them that all the Colonel Fitzwilliam came because he had pleasure in their society, a persuasion which of course recommended him still more, and Elizabeth was reminded by her own satisfaction in being with him, as well as by his evident admiration of her former favorite George Wickham, and though in comparing them she saw there was less captivating softness in Colonel Fitzwilliam's manners, she believed he might have the best informed mind. But why Mr. Darcy came so often to the parsonage, it was more difficult to understand. Oh. It could not be for society, as he frequently sat there 10 minutes together without opening his lips, and when he did speak, it seemed the effect of necessity rather than of choice, a sacrifice of propriety, not a pleasure to himself. He seldom appeared really animated. Mrs. Collins knew not what to make of him. Colonel Fitzwilliam's occasionally laughing at his stupidity proved that he was generally different, with her own knowledge of him which her own knowledge of him could not have told her, as she would have liked to have believed this changed the effect of love, and the effect of that love her friend Eliza. She set herself seriously to. She watched him whenever they were at Rosling's and whenever he came to Hunsford, but without much success. He certainly looked at her friend a great deal, but the expression of that look was disputable. It was an earnest, steadfast gaze, but she often doubted whether there was much admiration in it, and sometimes it seemed nothing but absence of mind. She had once or twice suggested to Elizabeth the possibility of his being partial to her, but Elizabeth always laughed at the idea, and Mrs. Collins did not think it right to press the subject, from the danger of raising expectations which might only end in disappointment, for in her opinion it admitted not of a doubt that all her friend's dislike would vanish if she could suppose him to be in her power. In her kind schemes for Elizabeth, she sometimes planned her marrying Colonel Fitzwilliam. He was beyond comparison for the most pleasant man. He certainly admired her, and his situation in life was most eligible. But to counterbalance these advantages, Mr. Darcy had considerable patronage in the church, and his cousin could have none at all. So just kind of again, like a casual conversation between the two, and kind of this, you switch that narrative to the friend here to kind of be like, huh, Darcy acting mighty sus. I hope some people catch that in the recording, It's interesting, yeah, we have no viewers anymore. I wonder if people thought I was going to be reading, like, Sonic fan fiction. That would have been a good idea, too. I just thought the idea that Josh DaBoss reads you a love story would be crazy. And now I'm kind of, like, pissed that people don't want to see me reading them a love story. I just put freaking, like, chat, Like, give me freaking something. Oh, Oh, shoot. Imagine railing your friend and she makes an after-sex TikTok that goes so viral even your parents see it. 6 million views. That would suck, wouldn't it? That's just straight facts. Yeah, you wouldn't want that. Subscribe, you nerds. Subscribe. God dang it. Freaking subscribe. You whores. You fucks! Subscribe! More. Dang it. I want to put it on like my story or something, you know. More than once did Elizabeth, in her ramble within the park, unexpectedly meet Mr. Darcy. She felt all the perverseness of the mischance that should bring him where no one else was brought, and, to prevent its ever happening again, took care to inform him at first that it was a favorite haunt of hers. How it could occur a second time, therefore, was very odd. Yet it did, and even a third. It seemed like a willful ill nature or a voluntary penance, for on these occasions it was not merely a few formal inquiries and an awkward pause and then away, but he actually thought it necessary to turn back and walk with her. He never said a great deal, nor did she give herself the trouble of talking or of listening much, but it struck her in the course of their third rencontre, I don't even know what the frick that word is, rencontre, that he was asking some unconnected questions about her pleasure in being in Hunsford. Oh, jeez. Crap, we're getting somewhere, boys. We're getting somewhere. You gotta appreciate the one like I got. I did like that. And it did, and even a third. It seemed like a willful ill nature of but her pleasure in being at Hunsford, her love of solitary walks, and her opinion of Mr. and Mrs. Collins' happiness, and that in speaking of Rosings and her not perfectly understanding the house, he seemed to expect that whenever she came into Kent again, she would be staying there too. His words seemed to imply it. Could he have Colonel Fitzwilliam in his thoughts? She supposed, if he meant anything, he must mean an allusion to what might arise in that quarter. It distressed her a little, and she was quite glad to find herself at the gate in the pale opposite of the parsonage. She was... Oh, shoot, we got someone. Hey, what's up? What is up, my boy? Comment in that live chat. Get yourself permanently included in the video. And, hey, you know what? Yeah, give me some... tell me what to play in terms of music, too. And I'll play some epic background music, you know. Give me those recommendations, you know. And join in for the ride as I read you this epic love story. Right now, Elizabeth and Darcy are going crazy at it right now, you know. We haven't made to the sex scene yet, but we are well on our way. Without further ado, let me get back in to this. She supposed if he meant anything, he must mean an allusion to what might arise in that quarter. It distressed her a little, and she was quite glad to find herself at the gate in the pales opposite the parsonage. She was engaged one day as she walked in perusing Jane's last letter, and dwelling on some passages which proved that Jane had not written in spirits, when instead of being again surprised by Mr. Darcy, she saw on looking up that Colonel Fitzwilliam was meeting her. Putting away the letter immediately and forcing a smile, she said, I did not know before that you ever walked this way. I have been making the tour of the park, he replied, as I generally do every year, and intend to close up with a call at the parsonage. Are you going much farther? No, I should have turned in a moment. And accordingly she did turn, and they walked towards the parsonage together. Do you certainly leave Kent on Saturday? Said she. Yes, if Darcy does not put it off again, but I am at his disposal. He arranges the business just as he pleases. And if not to please himself in the arrangement, he has at least pleasure in the great power of choice. I do not know anybody who seems to enjoy the power of doing what he likes than Mr. Darcy. He likes to have his own way very well, said Colonel Fitzwilliam. Hey, again, whoever's in here, put your name in the freaking chat. There's a live chat. Tell me who you are. Let me know. Let me know you're in here, bro. I need to know. we're not gonna have some personal conversation here. I'm reading you a love story. You know, I'm putting my heart and soul out here. You gotta give. I'm giving my 100%. You gotta give 10% back, baby. You gotta give 10% back. Fine, be that way. Just watch with an all-seeing eye. Imagine, see if I care. Although then again, you might be watching without a YouTube account. Which, if that's the case, hit a like on this video. I think. Can you like if you don't have a YouTube account? I don't think you can you? Well, I didn't think about that. I do wonder how you got here without a YouTube account, but you know, that's on you. So we all do. It is only that it's only that he has better means of having it than many others, but he is rich and many others are poor. I speak feelingly. A younger son, you know, must be injured to self-denial and dependence. In my opinion, the younger son of an earl can know very little of either. I'm lost. Now, seriously, what, lost. God dang it. What a terrible, terrible way to go out. Well, it is what it is. In my opinion, the younger son of an earl can know very little of either. Now, seriously, what have you ever known of self-denial and dependence? When have you been prevented by want of money from going wherever you choose, or procuring anything you had a fancy for? These are home questions, and I prepare. Hey, what's up? What's up, gamer? That we have been prevented by want of money from going wherever you chose, or procuring anything you had a fancy for? These are some home questions, and I perhaps cannot say that I have experienced many hardships of that nature. But in matters of greater weight, I may suffer from want of money. Younger sons cannot marry where they like, unless they like women of fortune, which I think they very often do. Our habits of expense make us too dependent, and there are not many in the rank of life who would afford to marry without some attention to money. Is this, thought Elizabeth, meant for me? And she colored at the idea, but recovering herself, said in a lively tone, And pray, what is the usual price of an earl's younger son? Unless the elder brother is very sickly, I suppose you would not ask above 50,000 pounds. Hey, yo, again, if this is a new person you just joined in, hit up that live chat, bro. Hit a like in the video, subscribe. This is not a usual thing on the channel. I'm just doing homework and giving myself a reason to read through this without clocking out every 30 seconds. So, thank you. Is this, thought Elizabeth, meant for me? Oh, yeah, I already read that. He answered her in the same style, and the subject dropped. To interrupt a silence which might make him fancy her affected with what had passed, she soon afterwards said, I imagine your cousin brought you down with him chiefly for the sake at his disposal. I wonder he does not marry, to secure a lasting convenience of that kind. But perhaps his sister does as well for the present, and as she is under his sole care, he may do what he likes with her. No, said Colonel Fitzwilliam, that is an advantage which you must divide with me. I am joined with him in the guardianship of Miss Darcy. Are you indeed? And pray what sort of guardians do you make? Does your charge give you much trouble? Young ladies of her age are sometimes a little difficult to manage, and if she has the true Darcy spirit, she may like to have her own way. As she spoke, she observed him looking at her earnestly, and the manner in which he immediately asked her why she supposed Miss Darcy liked to give them any uneasiness, convinced her that she had somehow or other got pretty near the truth. She directly replied, You need not be frightened. I never heard any harm of her, and I dare say she is one of the most tractable creatures in the world. She is a very great favorite with some of the ladies of my acquaintance, Miss Hurst and Miss Bingley, and I think I have heard you say that you know them. I know them a little. Their brother is a pleasant gentleman like. He is a great friend of Darcy's. Oh, yes, said Elizabeth dryly. Mr. Darcy is uncommonly kind to Mr. Bingley, and takes a prodigious deal care of him. care of him. Yes, I really believe Darcy does take care of him in those points where he most wants care. From something he told me in our journey hither, I have reason to think Bingley very much in Mr. Bingley very much indebted to him. But I ought to beg his pardon, for I have no right to suppose that Bingley was the person meant. It was all conjecture. What is it you mean? It is a circumstance which Darcy could not wish to be generally known, because if it were to get round to the lady's family, it would be an unpleasant thing. You may depend upon my not mentioning it. And remember when I have much reason for supposing it to be Bingley? What he has told me was merely this, that he congratulated himself on having lately saved a friend from the inconveniences of a most imprudent marriage, but without mentioning names of any particulars, and I only suspected it to be Bingley from believing him from the kind of young man to get into a scrape of sort. Oh my God, I'm losing it. Did Mr. Darcy give you the reasons for this interference? I understood there were some very strong objections against the lady. What arts did he use to separate them? He did not talk to me of his own art, said Fitzwilliam, smiling. He only told me what I have told you now. Elizabeth made no answer, and walked on, her heart swelling with indignation. After watching a little, Fitzwilliam asked why she was so thoughtful. I am thinking of what you have been telling me, said she. Your cousin's conduct does not suit my feelings. Why has he to be the judge? You are rather disposed to call his interference officious. I do not see what right Mr. Darcy had to decide on his propriety of his friend's inclination, or why upon his own judgment alone he has to determine and direct in what manner his friend was to be happy. But she continued, recollecting herself, as we know of none of the particulars, it is not fair to condemn him. It is not to be supposed that there was much affection in this case. This is not an unnatural surmise, said Fitzwilliam, but it is a lessening of the honor of the cousin's triumph very sadly. Again, if you're in here and it's not just you, Kate, is this just still you, Kate? Who is in the chat right now? I'm genuinely wondering who is watching right now. Like, just for my own curiosity's sake, is it just me watching it? Because I really hope I'm just not talking to myself, because that's disappointing if that's the case. But if there really is someone over there on the other side, give me a sign. I don't know how you would do that. I just want to know, man. I just want to freaking know. I just want to be loved. Like Elizabeth is by Mr. Darcy. Fudge, bro, fudge. We're only on, we've read, 2 chapters, which is good. So, we're about halfway. I think we're almost. This was spoken jestingly, but it appeared her so that just a picture of Mr. Darcy, that she would not trust herself with an answer, and therefore, abruptly changing the conversation, talked on indifferent matters until they reached the parsonage. There, shut into her own room, as soon as their visitor left them, she could think without interruption of all that she had heard. It was not to be supposed that any other people could be meant than those with whom she was connected. There could not exist in the world 2 men over whom Mr. Darcy could have such boundless influence. That he had been concerned in their measures taken to separate Bingley and Jane, she had never doubted, but she had always attributed to Miss Bingley the principal design and arrangement of them, and his own vanity. Oh my God, that is pretty freaking warm. Focus on the legs over there. And his own vanity, however, did not mislead him. He was the cause, his pride and his caprice were the cause of all that Jane had suffered, and still continued to suffer. He had ruined for a while every hope of happiness for the most affectionate, generous heart in the world, and no one could say how lasting an evil he might have inflicted. Those were some very strong objections against the lady, were Colonel Fitzwilliam's words, and those strong objections probably were her having one uncle who was a country attorney, and another who was in business in London. To Jane herself, she exclaimed, there could be no possibility of objection, all loveliness and goodness as she is. Her understanding excellent, her mind improved, and her manners captivating. Neither could anything be urged. She's still saying this. Neither could anything be urged against my father, who, though with some peculiarities, has abilities Mr. Darcy himself would need not disdain, and respectability which he will probably never reach. When she thought of her mother, her confidence gave way a little, but she would not allow that any objections there had material weight with Mr. Darcy, whose pride, she was convinced, would receive a deeper wound than the want of. Oh my God, that's freaking warm, bro. That is warm. Jeez. I got my heater on. I'm just gonna skip through this. What was a deeper wound in the importance of our friend's connection with us and the last partly by the kind, partly by the wish of Mr. Dingley for his sister. The agitation and tears which the subject occasioned brought on a headache, and it grew so worse towards the evening that, added to her unwillingness to see Mr. Darcy, it was determined her not to attend her cousins to Rosings, where they were engaged to drink tea. Mrs. Collins, seeing that she was really unwell, did not press her to go as much as possible, prevented her husband from pressing her, but Mr. Collins could not conceal his apprehension of Lady Catherine's being rather displeased by staying at home. Well, that was chapter 33. Oh my God. What, I think we started in chapter 30. Yeah, we started in chapter 31, so we read 31, 32, and 33. So we read 3 chapters. I think we're going to stop in 34, and I might do another live stream tomorrow. Hit me in the chat! I'm just trying to get a response out of people right now. If you're in here right now and you don't know me, I am Josh DaBoss. My YouTube channel is just all over the place. I have more videos that are coming out soon in the future. So definitely, this is a good time to get into this and just kind of see how things are going. I want to use like candy, but I never just gum. Yeah? Okay. How long is chapter 34, boys? It's not too long. I'm just gonna skim through it on my own, real quick. There we go, Elizabeth, as of intending to exasperate yourself as much possible. Wait, what? Frick! I stopped reading at this point. All right, I'm gonna read at this point because this is crazy. So Mr. Darcy comes into this area. I assume this is him, Mr. Darcy, and he says he sat down for a few moments and then getting up walked about the room. Elizabeth was surprised but said not a word. After a silence of several minutes, he came towards her in an agitated manner and thus began: "In vain I have struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell me how ardently I admire and love you. Elizabeth's astonishment was beyond expression. She stared, colored, doubted, and was silent. This he considered sufficient encouragement, and the avowal of all that he felt and had long felt for her immediately followed. He spoke well, but there were feelings besides those of the heart to be detailed, and he was not more eloquent on the subject of tenderness than of his pride. His sense of her inferiority, of its being a degradation of the family obstacles which had always opposed to inclination, or dwelt on with a warmth which he seemed in the suit. Okay. Dang. Oh, shoot, here it is, yeah. Hey, what's up? Take an eager interest in this gentleman's concern, said Darcy in a less... Dang, this is chapters longer than I thought it was. Oh my god. That she should receive an offer of marriage from Mr. Darcy. That she should have been in love with her for so many months. So much in love with her as to wish to marry her in spite of all the objections which had even prevented his friends marrying his sister, and which it must appear at least with equal force in her own case was almost incredible. It was gratifying to have inspired unconsciously so strong an affection, but his pride, his abdominal pride, his shameless avowal of what he had done with respect to Jane, his unpardonable assurance in acknowledging though he could not justify in the unfeeling manner in which he had mentioned Mr. Wickham, his cruelty towards whom he had not attempted to deny, soon overcame the pity of which the consideration of attachment had for a moment excited. She continued in very agitated affliction till the sound of Lady Catherine's carriage made her feel how unequal she was to encounter Charlotte's observation, and hurried away to her room. Insane stuff, boys. Alright, that's it. Those are the 4 chapters of Pride and Prejudice. I'm done. I'm out of here. Josh DaBoss, out!